Hello and welcome to Wait, It Gets Better, the improvisational storytelling podcast. We bring you stories as often as we can scrape them out of the insides of our brains. I am, of course, Levi.
And I'm Seth.
No Reed today. He is off saving the world. He took Seth's place, holding up the world like Atlas of old, and Seth is back, and Reed is off holding up the world for a few more minutes. How you doing, Seth?
Doing all right.
Excellent.
I'd say I'm 29 years old, still wearing my wallet chain like I was 28.
That's right. It is your birthday today.
It is. I am not 29.
He's 29 years old.
Yeah, I'm 29.
Yeah. So this podcast is about storytelling. What we do is we find random story elements. We have story elements, but we come up with them on our own, and then we jam them together, kind of fusion cooking style, to try and mix things like mint and ground beef to see if we can make something that actually tastes good or sounds good. My story element for this week is opening scene, or beginning scene is what it's officially called, but I like to call it opening scene. How about you? What do you have, Seth?
Setting.
And perfect.
I can't remember. What was it that we added to banana bread one time? Was it like
mint.
Garlic? Was it mint?
Yeah,
I think it went fine with the banana bread.
Yeah.
I thought there was something more nefarious we did, but
it didn't go well with the hamburger that I made. I don't know.
We're aspiring cooks, I guess.
Yeah, yes. So you have setting. So I think you should go first because that'll kind of set up the lens in which we see the beginning scene through.
All right. The way I guess algorithms work, I've been getting a lot of stuff in my different feeds for the Civil War stuff, which is kind of cool.
Okay.
But also, like, why am I getting this? But I think it's like the anniversary of Gettysburg. That's probably why it was showing up.
Oh, okay.
For one of the reasons. So my setting is slightly derived from that. So the setting would be like post-Civil War. It doesn't have to be our Civil War, but it could be modeled kind of in a way that we might want to. But like post a Civil War, in kind of a Western style, right? Kind of picking up the...
Gotcha. Yeah.
Like it's kind of over, but like it's not over to some people. You know, where do they escape to kind of escape, maybe what they've done in the war, right? Which is kind of what our, Wild West was, right? Where you kind of had, the tail ends of the Civil War, people striking it out, bringing some of their old feuds, with them, either in, where they still lived or, as everything was kind of reintegrating or settling in. And that is where our setting takes place in that environment. So it's not... that's kind of about it, but that's kind of where we're at. Kind of a
absolutely.
Wild West kind of style, maybe, but kind of taking place right as this kind of Civil War, wherever we're at, has kind of come to a close. And of course, you've got the winning side and the losing side, and people who aren't happy with the results or escaping kind of the aftermath of it. And that's kind of where we're at.
Well, that's so interesting because my beginning scene is about a gathering, right? It's about a gathering, and I originally said it was going to be, my thought is that it was going to be right before a great turmoil, right? That this gathering was going to be kind of one person gathering many people together to kind of tell them that there was some great thing happening. But I think I'm going to pivot on the spot and say that it happens right after the Civil War. Right? So it's right after the Great Turmoil. Because, you think about it, after the Civil War, it wasn't, no war ends peacefully, Like, even afterwards, there was a lot of issues between the North and the South, There was a lot of anger and stuff that happened between them. So there was, off and on into the future, there was a lot of sort of contention, right?
Yeah. I really wish Reed was here, too, because he's like a history buff.
He's going to feel so bad. Good thing he's holding up the world. So what it is the beginning scene happens like this. Let me think about a way to make it better. The beginning scene happens like this. A ship leaves England. This is a large freighter transport ship. Leaves England. And on that ship, there is a society, a secret society has kind of endeavored to, how do I say this? Move the body of Merlin, right? So the body of Merlin was discovered, and they've endeavored to move it to the New World because of some great fight that was going on, that they were beginning to lose the power and the prestige that they had over in England, and so they moved it to the New World, right? However, the ship wrecks before it can get to the shores. Just a storm. Freak storm. I don't think anything really, it's not the work of the great evil or whatever. And so Merlin, in his sort of stone coffin, is thought gone. However, it's Merlin we're talking about, and he wakes up because he never really was asleep. He was just sort of waiting, and he makes his way off the ship from the crash to the New World. And this is during like in the few years preceding before the Civil War, right? And he travels. What's up?
I just was like, yep, following along.
And he travels around, right, the settled colonies, the settled United States as it is, kind of just acquainting himself with not only the people, but the land and the nature and the spirit of the place, right? And he takes no part in the Civil War as it happens, right? But just after, right, as peace, I'm making air quotes right now, peace has been declared, right? He gathers together a group of people and basically gives them, I'm looking at right now a list of notable American folk heroes: Paul Bunyan, John Henry, Johnny Appleseed, Calamity Jane, Pecos Bill, and Anna Oakley. I don't know when the Civil War was, what year it was.
61 through 65.
18?
18, yeah.
Okay, good. Because Anna Oakley was born in 1860. Then Pecos Bill, Calamity Jane. I don't really see years here. 1896. Anyways, either these are people who will go on to inspire these folk heroes, or these are people who will go on to birth these folk heroes, right? So like John Henry, I was hoping
he was earlier though.
Yeah.
Same with Johnny Appleseed.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is it's not starting there. Some of them he is gathering the remnants of the folk hero-ness. Do you know what I mean? And so it's a group of people who are roughly inspired by or surrounding these folk heroes, who will then, in later years, people will attribute their actions to John Henry. People will attribute their actions to Johnny Appleseed. People will attribute their actions in this story to Calamity Jane and Pecos Bill and Anna Oakley. Does that make sense?
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
So it's not that it's not that he gets Paul Bunyan, right? It's that Paul Bunyan's fame in part comes from what these people will do here, right?
And then gets attributed either to the earlier dates.
Yeah, the earlier legends, the earlier dates. And so this isn't Johnny Appleseed and Paul Bunyan and Calamity Jane and John Henry and Pecos Bill and Anna Oakley. This isn't them. This is just a group of people who will then... So there is a strong man, there is an incredibly tall man, there is women, there is all of these things. But he basically gathers them together and gives them this kind of like resetting the Knights of the Round Table, kind of like re-solidifying everything that he did for Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. He's doing here, right? He's centering them together. He's bringing them together. He's giving them a prize to go after. He's setting up. He's focusing all of their energies, right? So some of them are going to be anti-heroes, some of them are going to be good, but this is the adventures of the beginning of the tales of the American folk heroes, as sort of gathered together and instigated by Merlin, the old wizard, the old druid wizard. And that happens, like right after the end of the Civil War. And however long, if we say this is a couple of years later, where the story starts, or if it happens right away, then that's fine. That's it. That's the beginning scene as he's kind of gathering them together. I have this picture of like a hill with some, not standing stones, not Stonehenge kind of, but kind of a rocky hill that looks out over America, right? And they all come up from different angles. The Paul Bunyan character is obviously traveling south. The
Devil's Tower.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sure. Devil's Tower. That works. That's the tree.
I think it's the one that, yeah, the conspiracy is that it's,
It's a
an
giant
old
tree.
ancient tree.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's like
It's like
it's
800.
like it's like in northeast Wyoming.
Oh, yeah,
And
that'd be
so I guess
perfect.
that would put it, fairly central, right? For that idea of, looking out over, I guess you could say, the whole of the United States.
Right. You'd be able to see the plains and you'd be able to see the mountains.
And who knows, maybe it was even taller, thinking like if it's like maybe Merlin's tower here, and maybe there's, somehow it gets
Right.
destroyed or whatever, and so it's maybe not as tall, but
Right. And part of my thought
eventually as we remember it.
is that at the beginning, so Merlin is going to play no part in the story other than the fact that he gives these people, he gives them the basis of their authority, right? He doesn't like lay hands on them and give them power necessarily, but he like orients them all to a way that they can be the most themselves. And that way they can, like, if you find a person who is most honest with themselves, it's a person you can remember. It's a person that can stick out. It's a person that can be a blazing light, where if someone just lives their life according to the whims and never really sort of captures what's true in their heart, they tend to not be that memorable. So my thought is that he's reconsecrated ground on top of this, and he basically tells them that his time is short. He has spent this time here, and he has touched them all. He's touched all their lives in some way, and then he's called them here, and now he has to rest for 100 years or more, before he can come back, before he can wake up again. Whatever, he has to go back into his druid sleep, basically. Like he's done what he can. He gave Lincoln what advice he could when he spoke to him in the White House. He's done everything he can, and this is what he's trying to do to carry on his legacy. And he's like, it's you guys. And so he goes back into, lays back down into his thing, and the John Henry and the Paul Bunyan guy, they move the giant stone over his, it's not a tomb, it's just like a giant sarcophagus, and then they're kind of there, and some of them are there unwillingly, some of them are there really willingly. Like, I foresee the Johnny Appleseed character being really like a druid, right? He's the most devout to doing it because Merlin told him to, right? And so he goes on and tries to, he's the one who quotes Merlin, quotes the words that Merlin told him, where everyone else, is happy to do it in one way or another, but they're not as, they don't like quote him specifically. So that's kind of the beginning scene. What do you think? It's a little bit convoluted, but when you said the Americas and then you said the Civil War, part of my thought is that Merlin tells them right at the beginning that there is something, like, such a terrible thing has just been settled finally. This great war has just resolved, but there is something worse coming. There is some worse thing coming. And they're all here to hold that back, to fight against it, to, if anything, just stand up for what's right. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the, and I don't think that they all go off together necessarily,
I think this would be something where perhaps, like, in the beginning, you're looking at about maybe 5 years after, so 1870, right? I'm trying to think, 30, which then would put you, whatever it is, this journey, these things they're doing, accumulate that maybe this other great struggle that they're preparing something for, and what that might look like. I have a few ideas popping around in my head, but I might not get to them on this episode directly. We'll have to see how it goes. Right.
Yeah.
But then if you put it there, World War I, right, is relatively close, right?
Yeah, I suppose.
Right. Where it gives them time to kind of develop, like, their folk heroiness, like all this stuff that goes on up to that point. Right.
It's only 50 years between the Civil War and World War One. 52 years technically, but that's crazy.
So either somewhere mid 1870s, maybe close to 1880, maybe, where this is picking up.
Yeah, yeah. And I kind of want to rescind that. I think that maybe Merlin didn't come over right before the Civil War, but maybe Merlin came over like at the near beginning of the American colonization. So he's been kind of in the Americas for the whole time, and it's only after the Civil War that he kind of passes this off, you know. Not to say that he's the author of all peace or anything, but that just makes it so he's not like, I came out of rest like 2 years ago and now I'm feeling kind of tired. It's like, no, he's been here for a while. So
Yeah,
from the Revolutionary War to the Civil War was 80 years, 78 years. That's the end. So anyways, what did you think?
Oh, right. Just kind of back to like some of the folk hero stuff. If he was here this whole time, he could have done the things that, let's say, our Johnny Appleseed did,
Right.
Or our Paul Bunyan did, right?
Yeah.
In a sense. But then now with this like new group of people that have kind of like taken this over, each of them kind of, I don't know if hyper fixate, but kind of follow along in like one of the footsteps of some of the things that he did, which then gets attributed that those things that, like, say, in the American folk idea get attributed to those people, right? So then our John Henry, right? They remember the things that Merlin, and then also John Henry has done in some of this stuff as John Henry, because he's this character now that has kind of carried that part of that mantle. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And so then they attribute, because I think like Johnny Appleseed would have like kind of went west as with the expansion, planting apple seeds, right? Kind of that druid, like kind of nature planting, preparing the way for, settlers to have some of this stuff already in place as they moved west, right?
Right.
Trying to think of Paul Bunyan here. Like there's a few things that I'm trying to remember on that, right? Kind of, lumberjack, had a lot to do with, I think, there was something with
So it's
Paul
most
Bunyan
like
putting.
loggers in Canada, the upper Midwest, larger than I'm just reading from this little article thing that I pulled up. Apparently it was popularized from a promotional pamphlet for the Red River Lumber Company as a marketing campaign. But it doesn't have to be like I said, it doesn't have to be necessarily a full sort of, it could just be his strength. It could be his larger than life appearance, his larger than life persona, his sort of way Merlin connects with animals, Babe in the Big Blue Walks. It's like his comfortability in the plains or in the deep forest. All of these people were gathered here because at some point in time, Merlin walked amongst these people and was instrumental in them in some way. And one person in particular who could eventually take up the call and come to this place to meet Merlin to then be sent back out. So all of these people just kind of represent a bit of who he is. John Henry is a lot of the same thing as Paul Bunyan, larger than life, but John Henry specifically, a lot of his folklore centers around the labor of the man, but the labor versus the labor of a machine, right? And so John Henry's big thing is that he raced a steam-powered rock drill to dig through a mountain, and he won, but at the end of it, his heart succumbed to the extreme stress, and he died after winning the race. So it's Merlin's dedication against technology, against convenience, against the modernization. That's like a bit of that. That's his fight against rationalism. It's his dedication towards the kind of the spirit of man. Yeah. Johnny Appleseed, obviously you've already said that. Pecos Bill, that's Wild Bill, right?
I think so.
Yeah, we can just forget Pecos Bill. That's fine. And then I don't know about Anna Oakley. I was just looking at this.
She was I would say marksman, right?
Markswoman.
Yeah, markswoman. But that's
male. Yeah, she competed against male sharpshooters. This shooting match she won. She kept touch. Cool. I don't know what Anna Oakley would be, but all of these have and Calamity Jane was often overshadowed by her association with Wild Bill Hickok, James Butler Hickok. So even if it's Calamity Jane and Wild Bill there together, the reason I said Calamity Jane is because she was in this list of ones that I looked up. So
okay.
each one of them kind of then spreads back out, maybe to where they're a part of, to what region they're associated with, or what industry they're associated with, and then there is some great thing coming, like you said, maybe like World War I, that there is not a mission, but how do I say this? It's a glue. It's glue that Merlin wants. He doesn't want. It's not an enemy he wants to attack. It's glue. He wants to keep the people together. He wants to glue the people back together because the Civil War has just ended. So there's something crazy that's happening, and the end result of that crazy thing that's happening is division, divisiveness, miscommunication, the unwillingness to talk, the unwillingness to work out our differences, the breaking down of society, which is what eventually led to World War I, right? According to what I understand. Jeez, we chose a bad episode to not have Reed here.
Yeah.
Maybe I should have held the world up and he could have been here.
Well, he'll have to catch us up.
Yeah, he'll have to tell us about how all of our assumptions are wrong or right when it comes to these things. So do you have any other interesting story building elements you want to include in this?
The one thing that I was throwing around would be, if we're kind of doing alternate history, perhaps this is an alternate history where Lincoln was not killed.
Okay.
And Reed can correct me, but I think I'm right in this and he might agree with me. So this will be a test to see if he listens to this episode before he does the next episode with us. So if he comes in fighting or agree, we'll know.
Yes, we'll know.
Is that the Reconstruction and the post-Civil War would have looked a lot different.
Oh, interesting.
If Lincoln was alive, because Lincoln, from my understanding, had an unpopular opinion amongst some people that he wanted to simply reintegrate the South as if nothing had happened, right?
Okay. How is that different from what happened?
So what happened and this might be in some of the things where you have different ideas with Reconstruction, but what you had was more of a heavier hand in like government oversight with like who could vote, when they could vote, if they, all kinds of stuff, right? Which then caused a lot more of your rise of the Ku Klux Klan, right? Causing a lot more turmoil with the dissatisfaction with having lost, right? Integrating more of a dramatic shift to take harsher actions in either ways, right? They sent down what would have been carpetbaggers. So basically moved in a bunch of people from the north, right, with the specific sole purpose of kind of continuing to suppress and make, like, let's say more northern, and this might get misconstrued too with what you would say was northern values and southern values with the war. But let's just say that it was not the smooth transition that Lincoln would have had, the idea that like we're all the Union, right? And he didn't want to see the dissolution of the Union.
Right.
And so if the war is over, then they send their delegates back to Congress. They send their people back, right? We just like carry on like nothing happened, right? But then with Reconstruction, it was kind of more of a...
It was kind of more of a re-education, like forced
exactly.
And so there's some things might have needed to be re-educated, but there was probably a lot of culture that did not necessarily need to be re-educated, but then was forced to be, is what you're saying.
Right. Whereas I think Lincoln would have had the idea that's like, right, you come back and we work our differences out the way our founders set up Congress and our elected officials and stuff. Right, like where we left off and had the disagreement, right? Obviously now there's some things that would change, but right, a more like bringing a family back together, not like now you're a conquered nation. And that's kind of how Reconstruction went in a lot of ways.
Gotcha. So you're saying, so Lincoln's plan was to do a more kind of prodigal son coming home and less of like, now you have to do everything the way I want you to do it and stop doing
Correct.
the things. Yeah, I can see how that would mean, who knows? We don't know, but that's why it's fiction, so.
And I think it would come with its own set of, issues to work out with. But I think it would make a different or more interesting look at it that way from a perspective of we're reintegrating and trying to smoothly bring, that separated couple back together or like the...
Right. Well, maybe then what there should be is the same secret society, and I'm not going to name it something. I'm not going to say it's the Illuminati. I'm just going to say the secret society that brought Merlin over morphed into kind of like the Merlin government support agency, right? It's like the thing, because like the government wants to know where Merlin is at all times because, you know, he can do these crazy and incredible things and he's so persuasive and has so much power. But Merlin isn't going to like do that. But what he will accept is, you know, he's walking down a road and at the post office, there's a guy waiting and he sees Merlin and he recognizes him and he walks to him and he, you know, shows him the amulet that he has. And Merlin says, okay, hi, what's up? And he goes, well, the president was wondering if you would address, you know, he just wanted you to know about this thing that's happening. And Merlin would be like, all right, I'm going to go off and do this thing over here. And then they're like, okay. And so there's an entire organization that's not for keeping track of Merlin, but it's for keeping track of Merlin. And so part of me is thinking that our main characters should not be these folklore people, but agents of this kind of government agency to watch and react to the Merlin phenomenon, right? And so our heroes...
The people rise up, release the Merlin files.
Yeah, exactly. And so...
We can neither confirm nor deny the presence of Merlin here tonight.
Yeah. Says the guy with the big white beard. It's like, we could not release... I was trying to do a British accent, but I accidentally did a different one. And so I would say that our heroes, so these folklore characters will come in to the story and do the thing, but they have agreed to take on this position of being Merlin's emissaries, but they're not the heroes of this story that we're writing. The heroes of the story that we're writing are the like everyday beat cop American secret agents who are just like trying to manage the situation and stand up for what's right according to the edicts of the Constitution and the American system, but also according to this like mystical power and person of Merlin. Does that make sense? As far as like how the story would go, I was thinking that would be kind of an interesting way to do it rather than having one of these folklore people be the main character or the hero or them being a quartet. It's instead, it's kind of like, you've seen the Avengers movies, right? It's kind of like
some of them. There's
all the Avengers, right? And then there's like S.H.I.E.L.D., you know, like this agency of just like regular guys try to like help the superheroes deal with the thing, you know, and they can't like, you know, chop down trees with one hit or anything like that. All they can do is like try and run resistance a little bit and, you know, do a lot of research and kind of like be there to support them when they show up to do like their crazy work, you know, but they're the ones going into the small towns after the Civil War. Cause like, you know, if Calamity Jane were to show up, or the Calamity Jane archetype character were to show up at a town to clean up that town or to do something, people are going to be much more deceptive. Plus she can't go to every single town that exists. She needs a report at some point about where the actual big bad guy is, you know? So the story is about this government organization under, you know, who reports to the president, whose job it is to find these things that are happening. You know, it's like, yes, we call up Calamity Jane or Wild Bill or Anna Oakley when it's time to go fight the Chupacabras, right? But we need to know where the Chupacabras are, and so therefore we have people posing as train conductors and, you know, Pony Express men and sheriffs and, you know, all these things who are just kind of being the fact and information gathering. Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's who our story's actually about. That's who our story's going to be written from the perspective of. And then every once in a while, you know, the Paul Bunyan character will just come into the scene, you know, and like fist fight Bigfoot, right? But it's not about him. It's about all the other guys who are like going through the forest. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I kind of like that. Because because those people are important, you know, and they can rise up, and maybe those people can rise up to become their own folk heroes as it were. You know, I would say that like there's the vision as a whole, but then each of them has dedicated a specific what would you call it? Like there's there's a couple different branches of this organization, and each branch is dedicated to a specific folk hero. First Merlin, and then once this information about what he's doing and what he did was kind of discovered, there's people there to support the Paul Bunyan character. Even though he himself might not notice that they're there, there's people there who are writing down what he's doing, who are telling the story of him, to people, to bring up bring up his prestige and to solidify the folkloriness of him, the folk hero-ness of him, to cement him as a person in history so that his impact can continue on. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. Well, we will pick up there next week, hopefully with Reed telling us all about history that we got wrong, but that's fine. Anything else you want to add, Seth?
No, I think that's good for now.
Cool. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Wait, It Gets Better. Thank you for joining us as we begin to puzzle out another masterpiece. If you like this idea, style, kind of spitballing, kind of brainstorming method, tell your friends. Tell us. Send us a message at waititgetsbettercast@gmail.com or message us on Twitter at @getsbettercast. Until next week, when we join you again, don't forget to wait, because it gets better.